Welcome back to Whispers from the Wizarding World. In this part, what once felt familiar begins to unravel. A lesson meant to be safe reveals something that refuses to follow the rules. Some fears change shape. Some fears can be laughed away, and some never should be seen clearly at all. Settle in, lower your guard, and continue the story.
Story 7. The Boggart That Wouldn't Change. Professor Aldrich Crane had been teaching defense against the dark arts at Hogwarts for 15 years. He'd covered everything from Grindylows to Inferi, from recognition of cursed objects to basic shielding charms. He was well liked by students, respected by colleagues, and had never had a serious incident in his classroom until the day they practiced on the Boggarts were standard curriculum for third-year students, shape-shifting creatures that assumed the form of whatever their viewer feared most, then could be defeated with the ridiculous charm which transformed the fear into something amusing. It was an effective lesson in facing fears and a relatively safe way to practice defensive magic. Professor Crane had obtained the Boggart from the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, properly contained in a sealed wardrobe, ready for the lesson. His third-year Gryffindor and Slytherin class gathered in the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom, excited and nervous in equal measure. Remember, Professor Crane told them, the Boggart will become whatever you fear most. The key is not to let that fear paralyze you. Visualize the thing transforming into something ridiculous. Then say the incantation clearly, ridiculous. Let's begin with something simple to demonstrate. He opened the wardrobe. The Boggart emerged, its natural form difficult to see, a sort of shapeless darkness that shifted and rippled. As soon as it saw Professor Crane, it transformed into a woman, middle-aged and tired-looking, with her arm in a sling and tears on her face. The students watched in confused silence. They'd expected a classic Fear spider, maybe, or a ghost, or you-know-who, not this ordinary-looking woman. Professor Crane's face had gone pale, but he maintained his composure. Ridiculous, he said clearly, and the woman transformed, her tears becoming streams of bubbles, her sling turning into a silly party hat. The students laughed uncertainly, and the Boggarts, weakened by their laughter, retreated slightly less. "You're next," Professor Crane said, his voice steady, but his hands shaking slightly, as he gestured a student forward. The Boggart shifted again, transforming into a massive spider for young Mr. Davies, who managed the spell well enough to turn it into a spider wearing roller skates. Then Miss Thornbury faced her fear of heights, successfully transforming a version of herself, falling into herself, bouncing on a trampoline. Everything was proceeding normally until Millicent Ashworth stepped forward. She was a quiet, Slytherin girl, studious and serious, not one to draw attention to herself. The Boggart shifted to face her, rippled as it prepared to transform, and didn't. It remained as it was, a shapeless, dark mass, neither one thing nor another. The students shifted uncomfortably. Professor Crane frowned. "Miss Ashworth, are you blocking your thoughts somehow? You need to let the Boggart sense your fear, or it can't transform." "I'm not blocking anything, Professor," Millicent said softly. I'm just standing here. The Boggart rippled again, and this time it did begin to change, but not into anything recognizable. It became something that hurt to look at directly, a shape that seemed to exist in too many dimensions at once, with angles that couldn't be real and surfaces that reflected light that wasn't there. Students began to back away, some of them crying out in distress. Professor Crane raised his wand, alarmed. Miss Ashworth stepped back. Everyone, get behind me. But Millicent didn't move. She stood transfixed, staring at the impossible thing the Boggart had become. And as the class watched in horror, she began to change. Her skin went pale, then gray. Her eyes turned black, completely black, no whites visible. When she spoke, her voice was layered, as if multiple people were speaking through her at once. Finally, the voices said, "Finally, someone sees us properly. Someone who doesn't filter what we are through simple fears." Professor Crane cast a stunning spell at the Boggart, but it passed through the creature without effect. He tried a banishment, a containment charm, 3 different defensive spells. Nothing worked. The Boggart, or whatever it had become, continued to shift and ripple, and Millicent continued to change, her form becoming less solid, more translucent. "What are you?" Professor Crane demanded. "We are what you call Boggarts," the voices from Millicent said, "but that's just a name you gave us, a convenient label. We're older than your language, older than your species. We existed before there were humans to fear things, and will exist after. Let the girl go, but she understands us now. She sees what we really are, not what you think we are. She knows the truth. We don't become your fears. We show you the reality that your fears hint at. We reveal the truth that lies beneath your comfortable illusions." The other students were panicking now, some trying to run for the door, others frozen in place. Professor Crane cast a Patronus, a silver wolf, that burst forth and charged at the Boggart thing. For a moment, it seemed to work, the creature shrinking back from the positive emotion the Patronus represented. But then the Patronus flickered. Its form became uncertain, shifting between wolf and something else. Something with too many legs and eyes that didn't belong on any natural creature. The silver light turned sickly green. "Even your happy thoughts aren't safe," Millicent's layered voices said. "Even your joy contains shadows. We are those shadows. We are the truth you refuse to see." Professor Crane did the only thing he could think of. He cast a powerful, stunning spell at Millicent herself. It was against every teaching instinct he had, but he needed to break the connection between her and the Boggart. Millicent collapsed. The Boggart rippled, its impossible form destabilizing, without her to anchor it. Professor Crane quickly forced it back into the wardrobe and sealed it with every containment charm he knew, then turned to his students. "Everyone to the hospital wing. Now, go." The students fled, and Professor Crane levitated Millicent's unconscious form, following them to see Madame Pomfrey. The school nurse examined Millicent carefully, her expression growing more concerned as her diagnostic spells revealed nothing. No curse, no hex, no lingering magical effects. She's perfectly healthy, Madame Pomfrey said, confused. Magically exhausted, perhaps, but nothing more. She should wake in a few hours. Professor Crane reported the incident to Headmistress McGonagall, who immediately sent an owl to the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures. They arrived within the hour specialists in dangerous beasts and containment protocols. They examined the wardrobe, ran tests on the Boggart inside, and eventually concluded that it was normal, but a perfectly standard Boggart, no more dangerous than any other. Whatever happened, the lead specialist said it wasn't the Boggart's fault. Boggarts can only reflect fears, not create new ones. If something else happened, it was the girl's unusual magical signature or some environmental factor, not the creature itself. But Professor Crane knew better. He'd seen what the Boggart had become, had heard what it said through Millicent, and he remembered something he'd read years ago in an old text about Boggart's theory that they aren't really shapeshifters at all, but reality revealers, that what we saw as our fears was actually a glimpse of deeper truths filtered through our psyche to make them bearable. Most people's deepest truth was something comprehensibly spider, a corpse, a failure. But Millicent's truth, apparently, was something else entirely. Something that the Boggart shouldn't have been able to show, but had. Millicent woke that evening. She claimed to remember nothing of the incident, which was probably a blessing. But Professor Crane noticed changes in her over the following weeks. She was quieter, more withdrawn. She would stare at things, walls, people, ordinary objects, with an intensity that suggested she was seeing something others couldn't. Once he asked her if she was all right. She looked at him with those dark eyes, normal again, but somehow different, as if they'd retained a memory of being completely blackened, said something that chilled him. Do you ever wonder, Professor, if what we see is real? If the world we think we live in is actually there? Or if we're just looking at a comfortable illusion, and the real world is something we couldn't survive seeing clearly? Professor Crane had no answer for that. He taught his remaining classes that year without using Boggarts, despite it being in the curriculum. He couldn't risk another student seeing what Millicent had seen, becoming what she had briefly become. The Boggart remained in its wardrobe, sealed in a storage room, labeled as potentially unstable in the department's records. Professor Crane sometimes thought about destroying it, but he was afraid that might release whatever truth it contained, let it spill out into the world uncontained. So it stayed locked away, a reminder that sometimes the things we teach students to face, the fears we help them overcome, might be protecting them from something worse. Reality so stark and strange that our comfortable fears are actually a mercy, a way of filtering truth through something we can process without losing our mind. Millicent graduated Hogwarts 3 years later. She went on to study theoretical magic at a university for witches and wizards, specializing in the nature of reality and consciousness. Professor Crane heard that she'd rewritten papers suggesting that what we call reality might be a consensus hallucination, a collective agreement about what exists that protects us from perceiving something that would destroy us. Her theories were dismissed as too abstract, too philosophical. But Professor Crane wondered, and every time he saw a Boggart in a textbook, saw students practicing the ridiculous charm, he thought about what Millicent had become, what he'd seen, and whether teaching students to laugh at their fears was really helping them, or just ensuring they did never see the truth that lay beneath.
Some fears don't change, they don't transform. They reveal what was never meant to be seen. Some truths hide behind laughter. Some realities wait for the moment you look too closely. Thank you for listening to Whispers from the Wizarding World. Subscribe and follow to continue with the next part of the story. Until then, some fears are safer left undefined.